are now very, very lucky to have with us a real favorite of this stage at ChangeNOW, someone who's been here many times. And I would like to invite her now, and then I'll give her the intro. And I would love you all to give a very warm welcome to Kate Williams, CEO of 1% for the Planet. Welcome, Kate. Oh, let me do a bit of hosting here. Get you some water. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you.
So, Kate, I'll give a super quick intro. CEO of 1% for the Planet and former, and I think a beautiful synergy here, former outdoor educator. And an interesting personal fact about her, she's oddly talented at standing on her head, on a yoga mat, on a paddleboard, or on a mountain top. We won't ask for a demonstration there, but I guess that shows some leadership lessons somehow. Kate, love to kick off with a little about your personal journey from outdoor education to now leading this movement. And yeah, maybe share a little about that journey for us.
Sure. Thank you so much. And I'm so thrilled to be here. And I think for me, the journey sort of is fitting for this ecosystem topic because my journey to becoming the leader of 1% for the Planet started when I basically fell in love with outdoor places, with wild places, with natural ecosystems. So my kind of connection to this work is very much grounded in an understanding of and a connection to being in the outdoors. And basically through that experience, I fell in love with the outdoors, and I got really curious about how do you organize a group of people to do a hard thing. And sort of those two themes have driven my career. And initially, when I was younger, it was great to spend about 10 years as an outdoor educator, connecting other people to that experience. And then I kind of shifted more to diving deeper on that curiosity about how you organize people to do big, hard things, and drawing on that experience of being in the outdoors.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kate. And for those who don't know, I guess many of you know 1% for the Planet, but I'd love it if you could just frame, first of all, what problem are you solving in the environmental philanthropic world, and then what's your model to solve that problem?
Yeah, what 1% for the Planet is trying to do, the problem we're trying to solve is to get more resources going from the business sector to the nonprofit sector. So businesses, as we've been talking about and learning about, can do incredible things in the marketplace, in the context of the marketplace. Nonprofits or NGOs or charities typically work where there is not a marketplace. So they're solving problems and creating impact in spaces where there may not yet or ever be a marketplace. And so what we're trying to do is connect those dots to take the best of what's happening in the business space to support the best of what's happening in the nonprofit space. And we do that through a really simple membership model. We have businesses all over the world who donate 1% of their top line sales to NGOs. And we facilitate all of that. I won't go into all those details, but our work is to connect all of those dots, and we're aiming towards driving big impact in terms of the dollars going into that nonprofit marketplace.
Can you share a bit more about your goal for that, the $1 billion, and where you are on the way?
Thank you. Yes, I was waiting for the big reveal. But basically, we've grown a lot over the last 20 years. We were founded by Yvonne Chouinard 20 years ago. And we started out with a donation of about $6. And last year, we got to our 600 millionth US dollar. So we're at $600 million US in lifetime giving. And so we're now on track and publicly targeting getting to $1 billion US in impact and building a movement that can get to the next billion and the next billion so that we can really keep driving powerful impact for planet and people.
Awesome. Thanks so much. We're getting a round of applause already. And this is a real problem too, right? Only, what is it, 3% of philanthropy is going to environmental causes?
Yeah, philanthropy is a super interesting tool, and it's one that is still not allocated in the ways that it could be to the environment. So typically, or in the past 10 years or so, we've seen the level of philanthropy going to environmental causes stuck at about 3% of total philanthropy. Total philanthropy has grown, but that percentage has not. And we're really looking at how can we think differently about philanthropy, how can we educate people to think differently about philanthropy, how can we maybe get a little more unreasonable about the ways that we see philanthropy being a tool, not the only tool. There's not one tool in this ecosystem way of thinking. There's not one single tool, but philanthropy represents a really important tool. Again, it's that outside of the marketplace tool that can be laser focused on really critical things that aren't yet solved by the marketplace.
Thank you for sharing. I'd love to now tie this to the title of this session. So a lot of that success and that $600 million US, etc., has actually been connected to, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, an ecosystem approach and a lot of community, a lot of collaboration at the heart of what you're doing.
Absolutely. I love this topic because I think ecosystems are a really important framework. And we've been talking about them here as in the sort of human business structure. But if we really go back to our roots, and if I go back to my roots of sort of realizing that this was the work I wanted to do in a wild place, ecosystems are a natural metaphor that we can use. So if we think about ecosystems in the wild, think about a meadow, or close your eyes and imagine a favorite place that is a wild and natural place. And it's not one thing, and it's not all things trying to do what the other things are trying to do. So in a healthy meadow, a certain type of grass is going to thrive in a wet environment. A certain type of grass is going to thrive where it's drier. If there's a lot of rain, those wet grasses, those happy grasses in the wet conditions, are going to be busier. They're going to do a lot more work to help the rest of the ecosystem. The ecosystem is also not all about just the one beautiful flower in the middle. It's about the pollinators. It's about the role that that flower plays for a certain period of the season. So I could go on, but my larger point is ecosystems are made of multiple interconnected and interdependent components. So at 1% for the planet, if we think about it that way, which we do, every component plays a key part. And what that does is it gets us to think differently about the allocation of resources and the allocation of power. So one of the things that 1% for the planet is doing is it's creating a relationship and a genuine partnership between businesses and nonprofits. That's one of the relationships in our network. And that's an important one to think about when we're thinking about allocation of resources and power, because traditionally, the power has been held by those who have the resources, and those who are receiving the resources are seen as having less power. What we're doing is saying, no, actually, there's a really fair exchange of power. So funding may go from the business to the nonprofit sector. Impact is driven by those nonprofits in this model. But then what happens also is the businesses are making changes internally, and they're realizing new things and creating new opportunities, and then that is another source of power. And so it goes on, but I think what we're really trying to do is create this understanding of interdependencies, of exchange of power, of health being a result of the diversity.
Awesome, yeah, I love that point on power. Can you maybe bring 1-2 stories of impact from your work to life through this for this audience?
Yeah, that's the hardest question always, because we have about 5,500 businesses and about 5,000 nonprofits. And if we say that every business is usually making more than one donation each year, we literally have thousands of partnerships on the ground. So thank you for giving me a really hard question, but a couple that I think are great because they sort of reveal some of this ecosystem flow of power. One is a company named Sunskis. They make really awesome sunglasses, and they joined 1% for the planet because basically they thought Yvon Chouinard was cool. They thought 1% for the planet was cool, good vibe. They were, wanted to do it. So they joined 1% for the planet, made the commitment, started making donation to a nonprofit called Adventure Scientists. And they had a great relationship. They were transferring resources to that nonprofit sector, funding citizen science. Everything was great. And then they met with the adventure scientists one year and got this great feedback of like, we love getting the check every year, but you guys actually have a lot of plastic in your packaging and in your product. And so the nonprofit was feeding back important information into the company. Obviously, they were hearing it from other places as well, but that relationship had enough importance that it was heard differently. And so they received that message. They then also got the same message when they met Yvon Chouinard. They were so excited about that, but he said, great, welcome to the community. You got a lot of plastic going on here. So they received that message, and fast forward 5 years, and they have not only eliminated all plastic from their packaging, but they've also created a new manufacturing process using recycled plastic from another 1% for the Planet member to create recycled plastic frames for their glasses. That's not going to change the world. That's one example, but it's a really great example of how real relationships where resources and power are exchanged can do way more than that initial step. So I love that example because it really shows me how things like 1% for the planet, which are based on a simple commitment, a simple big commitment. It's a real commitment. All of you who are out there who are members, you know it's a big annual commitment, but it's also one thing. It's not the whole thing. But that one thing based in real relationship in the context of the community, that is 1% for the planet, can really create the conditions for so much more change and so much more impact beyond that initial step. So that was one partnership example.
No, but a beautiful answer to the difficult question. Hopefully an even more difficult question. So I love that there's impact on both sides there, for the nonprofit and for the company. I think in this world there will definitely be critics of environmental philanthropy as a system, and the fact that probably not many in your network, but that some companies are probably doing some good and then using it as a cover to stop doing less harm, and that this could even be a distraction from the fundamental reshaping of our economy that we perhaps need to do to meet the challenges of our time. What do you say to that, and how can 1% for the planet be part of a real radical change that we need?
One of the things I think about a lot is 1% for the planet is a model. We're a model for engagement. We're also a theory of change. So our theory of change is that simple steps done repeatedly in community are how we, over time, change the world. So you take a simple step, you make that commitment, you become part of a momentum-creating experience. And that's very different than doing nothing or really analyzing it to death. So 1% for the planet, our theory of change is that a simple action moves you into a space of momentum and opportunities for further action. And that's through the act of taking the action, the act of doing it together with others in community, where you get that great spark of ideas, or you get people telling you got a lot of plastic in your product. So what we see and what we really think about is 1% for the planet sufficient alone? No, it's not. We don't represent it to be that. It's a very powerful step, but it's not the only step, and it shouldn't be the only step. What it is, and where its power lies, is that it gets you into this community where momentum can grow and where you can really drive change at scale. And that's where the magic happens. We still do, at the front end, have those conversations like, is this company engaged in the ways that are sufficient to having us feel confident that it's carrying us forward, that it's creating this community of positive momentum? And we do very occasionally make the decision of like, that seems like it's not a right fit for us or for them. What we benefit from is a couple things. One is 1% of sales. It's so easy to say 1%, but 1% of sales is a big number. There are some industries that have really high margins where it's not as big a number, but for any of you who are managing a P&L, you know that 1% of sales annually is a big number. So it's usually less expensive to be a bad actor. And so that helps us, because to take the 1% step just as a form of greenwashing, why would you do that? You could do it for a lot less. And we also find, and I think this is really the more important point, we feel like we would talk to anyone because, again, our theory of change is that simple actions done repeatedly in community over time drive change. And coupled with that is the theory of change that it can't just be working with the people who are already going to do it. We can't just give, extra worksheets to the A students. We really need to be engaging those people who are curious, who may have a lot of room to grow. And we know that our community is a great place to grow, to train, to get access to an incredible community of leaders in different industries who can help you to get better. So we remain highly optimistic that almost any company that joins us, we can sort of move them into that space of positive momentum and make it count.
Beautiful. Love it. Love the positive momentum. And that hints a little at it, maybe. But where do you then see the future of 1% for the planet? Is it about the real big players signing up for this and you continuing to be that broker? Or is it about you trying to make yourselves obsolete and not needed anymore because everyone is doing such great climate philanthropy? Where do you see it?
We think about really two things. One is movement building, and one is impact growing. And so in terms of movement building, that has to do with sort of the number and diversity of members and nonprofits that we bring in. So we currently, I mentioned, have about 5,500 members globally, and we'd love to see that number double, triple, on and on, because we really see our model as representing a kind of fundamental way of doing business and a new way of thinking about the economy. So just a quick show of hands, how many of you have staff that you pay on a regular basis? I really hope I see almost all hands going up. We pay our staff at our companies, right? How many of you have rent or assets that you lay out capital for or operating costs for? Okay, so why is it that I think it's such a stretch to pay the planet and the communities impacted by our actions alongside paying staff, paying rent? So our vision for growing a movement is that the economy shifts to seeing that it's not just as a cleaning up after ourselves. It's as in the same way that we care for the things that help our businesses to grow stronger. We care for the soil, the water, the biodiversity. All of that is part of the ecosystem, the natural and human interlocked ecosystems, because humans are part of nature, that we need to really have a thriving economy and a thriving place to live and thrive for the future. So that's the movement building. The impact growing is going to happen alongside that. So as we, and this is why we don't look to become obsolete, because right now some of the impacts that we're really focused on are addressing some of the things that have been negative in the past. So climate emissions is a great example. We have a lot of catching up to do there. But as we move forward, ideally we get to a healthier place. I'm pretty sure we're always going to have some problems to solve, but we also may have some opportunities to create some ways to rethink how we are doing agriculture, rethink how we are regenerating natural ecosystems. So that's the economy we envision, and that's the future we envision ourselves being part of.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. You touched a little on that future vision, on the values embedded in all of this. It's been 10 years now for you personally. You just celebrated a decade at 1% for the planet. What has been, and this can kind of wrap us up, what has been a red thread of a core value that your work has been rooted in, and particularly looking at ecosystem leadership?
I think the most important thing for me has been that we're building this big global movement, but it all comes down to relationships that are almost always pretty direct and personal. And you can't, people always say you can't scale those direct relationships, but I think 1% for the planet is kind of giving the lie to that, because what we see is that by really investing our hearts, and when I speak of our, I mean our staff. We have an amazing team that's really driven by core values of unleashing passion every day and growing stronger together. Those are literally a couple of our core values, and we all know them and live them and say them out loud. But through that, it kind of radiates out so that then when we go and visit members, last week I was in Belgium for an event, and one of our awesome members there had done all the legwork to pull it together, had really forged some amazing relationships and was able to introduce me to those people. But I also knew, when I'm back doing the rest of the things that I'm doing in other places on the planet, those relationships there are going to be in the context of 1% for the planet, in the context of our core values. So the heart of what we're doing continues to be those relationships that really connect us all and help us all to feel like we're part of this movement that's creating momentum.
Beautiful point to end this on. And I think, for all of us, when we're looking at our work on a high level, we often forget that at the heart of it is relationships. It's about people bonding, connecting, and moving us forward. So thank you so much, Kate. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this session. And we hope you also get the chance to mingle, and deepen some of your relationships today. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.